and I think it fucking traumatized him. And it
Is he still? Okay. Well, the good news is focus on the present. There's a fire exit near here, but unfortunately I'm a little bit lost.
Follow me. Back. I just
came.
Wait, is this? I just came from there. It's right here.
Cool. Okay. Well, wait. You. There's a chemical jug nearby here. You grab that chemical jug. Oh, Bracken.
It's difficult for me to describe why I liked Lethal Company so much. Don't get me wrong, it's not an obscure or unpopular horror game by any means. It was the game of late 2023 and early 2024, and still has impressive relevance despite infrequent updates. It is a uniquely hilarious and occasionally terrifying experience, amplified by the behavior of your crewmates and the bond you have with them, or form with them as the game goes on. But this game has always felt to me like something a little bit more than a party game like Among Us or Jackbox, and it's also felt like something more than some Rubik's Cube of spooky lore to be sold by video essayists like FNAF or Hello Neighbor. It's very much both of those things, don't get me wrong, but something about it has always struck me as more profound, I guess is the right word. I'm unsure how many people share my view on this game, and this video is my way of finding out. This video will not be focused on gameplay, nor will it be focused on solving the lore of the universe, though we will be looking at the lore. On this channel, I want to focus on the themes, the psychology, and the philosophy of storytelling. And while Lethal Company does get credit for its storytelling, the focus is usually on just the admittedly brilliant way it does exposition. Sometimes I get accustomed to Lethal Company. There was definitely a period where I played it too much and started getting burned out. This is the case for most games, and it makes it so easy for even superfans to forget what made these games so special in the first place. Nothing can ever capture that magical first month when me and my friends were playing with no idea how the game worked, discovering moons and monsters on our own for the first time. Though that magical feeling comes back in almost full strength whenever there's a new update, and to lesser degrees whenever I come back from a long break. You might think I'm talking about the fear and the mystique of the unknown that makes the game so addicting, and it's partially that. But there's something else. There's something about this game, baked into its core, that gives me a strange feeling, a familiar feeling, that we're not supposed to be here. My name is Thalia the Muse, I use she/her pronouns, and this is my video essay about how the world is ending and it's your fault. There are plenty of YouTube video essays explaining liminal spaces and their psychology, their horror, their appeal. I'm not going to spend too much time explaining what a liminal space is, but I'll still give it a quick summary. Liminal spaces are a kind of aesthetic used to describe both real and fictional places that give a strange feeling, a strange mix of nostalgia, serenity, unease, and existential dread. Think the backrooms, or the oldest views overgrown mall, or even abandoned Minecraft servers. It's tricky to pinpoint exactly what makes a space liminal, so I'll discuss a few different schools of thought. The adjective liminal relates to an idea of a transitional point, a place between places, coined by sociologists to discuss cultural rituals in which one transitions from one point of life to another, and is meant to be an other from the rest of the community in the process. So liminal spaces tends to refer to places like subways, city streets, office hallways, parking lots, airports, places that aren't home, places you're not comfortable in, places you wouldn't stay for long, or at least don't want to stay for long. Normally, you wouldn't give these places much thought, so when images like these force us to linger in these places, well, on one hand, you feel unshackled from the pressures of having to go somewhere, or do something, or be a part of society, and perhaps that is where the positive emotions of these spaces comes in. But still, it doesn't feel natural. You shouldn't be here. That's a pretty big part of liminal spaces, actually, the feeling that you shouldn't be here, which brings me to the second school of thought. The term liminal space is a very new idea on the grand scale of humanity. Liminality was coined by Arnold van Gennep in 1909, and the community around liminal spaces was formed on the internet primarily by Zoomers and Millennials during quarantine. But for as long as there have been buildings, humans have feared abandoned buildings and told all these ghost stories about them. This segues into the second school of thought, which is that liminal spaces are primarily places that feel like they should be populated, but aren't. Abandoned malls, abandoned houses, abandoned schools. Something's wrong. Everyone else has left, and you haven't. You shouldn't be here. Everyone else is gone, so why are you here? What do you think you'll find? Humans don't like being alone, and being alone in a place where you shouldn't be alone creates a cognitive dissonance. It makes us uneasy, but also curious. Especially when, unlike genuinely abandoned buildings where there wouldn't be electricity, the walls and ceilings wouldn't be maintained, there'd be mold and pests all over the place. No, this place can't be real. It can't be abandoned by humans, yet also kept in this pristine condition. Almost like it's not a real place and it's just a memory. Tying into that last sentence, there's also a strong element of childhood nostalgia in many of these images. Childhood nostalgia means different things for different generations, and since liminal spaces are primarily a concept discussed by teens and young adults, much of this nostalgia is centered on third spaces from the 90s and early 2000s. Malls, arcades, bowling alleys, libraries, schools, places one may have visited a lot in their childhood, but no longer visit. Perhaps because they grew up, perhaps because they're too busy, perhaps because these places no longer exist, destroyed by the movements of society, economy, or simply by the march of time. Being back there is nice. It reminds you of a time when you had so much less responsibility, so much less worries, but it's also a time when you felt much more helpless. You feared the unknown more. You felt much more at the mercy of forces greater than your comprehension. If you've played Lethal Company a lot, you probably know where I'm going with this. Not only does the game directly reference liminal horror like The Backrooms, and also The Shining, which I'd argue to be the predecessor of internet liminal horror, but you spend 90% of the games exploring abandoned buildings that were once populated by humans and still show signs of life, but are devoid of natural life forms. And there was an element of nostalgia built into Lethal Company's world, though it's more so focused on the 70s and 80s with its archaic technology and the general feel of a Cold War-era sci-fi horror film like Alien or The Thing. It replicates an era that we're no longer in, yet we still feel this era's influence everywhere. You also spend most of the game in transitional spaces. The closest thing you'll have to a home base is Gordian, which doesn't exactly feel like home. The ship is a transitional space. The alien planets you walk around are a transitional space. The hallways you extract scrap from are a transitional space, unless you try and treat them like a vacation home, in which case they'll quickly become a transitional space when you realize the native wildlife isn't kind to tourists. The entire game is just one massive journey from one place to another. There is no endpoint, no checkpoints, no home base. You go to one planet, then go to another, then go to another, until eventually you die. This is why I think Lethal Company has this strange feel to me. The whole game is just one long liminal space you explore with friends. It's not just for aesthetical purposes, though. I'd argue that the use of liminal space aesthetics in Lethal Company contributes to the game's broader grimdark aesthetic and existential dread. There's a certain aspect of Lethal Company's gameplay and lore that people have been theorizing about since the very beginning. Supposedly, the company monster, who we spend the entire game feeding scrap to, is looking for what it says it's looking for, scrap. Except generally valuable scrap is piles of metal, and yet most metal objects in the game sell for very little, while things like paintings and rubber ducks sell for far more than large axles and steel sheets. What could this eldritch monster possibly want with a set of fake teeth? A comedy mask? A dog plushie? It seems the monster will eat just about anything. So why is there so much variation in the reward the company gives out, even with two seemingly identical items? One of the first Lethal Company theories I ever heard discussed, back when I first got into the game in early December, was the idea that the monster values things based on sentimental value more than their actual economic value or physical composition. Perhaps the monster derives nutrients from the sentimental value, or perhaps a children's toy just tastes better than a stop sign. Sentimental value is extremely subjective, so perhaps that's why one coffee mug can sell for twice as much as another. One of them has more memories, positive, negative, neutral. Anyway, either way, it's more memories associated with this one than the other. Something else to note about the monster, people exposed to it seem to suffer varying degrees of retrograde memory loss. Every single Lethal Company video I watch goes over the Sigil logs in full, and I'm tired of it, so just go read them for yourself or source trust me, bro, when I say that they support the idea that the monster eats memories, or at the very least causes some kind of memory loss with its very presence. Not only does Sigurd and his crew keep forgetting things, but there's also probably some people inside of the monster's stomach itself, kept alive but slowly being digested and losing all their memories in the process. So yeah, the monster probably eats memories and sentimental value and shit. The objects we bring, it just being the plates or perhaps the bread of a memory sandwich, which makes the low cost that the player suits sell for even more depressing, but I digress. But Thalia, I hear the skinless corpse that proofreads my script say. I thought you said we're not talking about in-universe lore. Well, shut the fuck up, skinless corpse. This is important for the philosophical themes of Lethal Company. And no, I'm not just gonna say capitalism bad. I'll touch on that popular interpretation briefly at the end. Is it definitely part of the game's commentary? Yeah, but it's only tangentially related to what this video is talking about, which is the end of the world, and our part in it. You can easily return to the past, but no one is there anymore. This quote is from a random Weirdcore image, Weirdcore being another internet aesthetic with overlap, but it's not quite the same as liminal spaces. It's a quote that I have not been able to attribute to any original source older than this image, despite my rigorous 2 minutes of research. Still, I think this quote encapsulates the appeal behind both aesthetics. As much as I love to talk about Weirdcore more, it's not the focus of this video, and I'm not super familiar with it anyway, so we'll be focusing on how this mentality relates to liminal spaces. Lethal Company is a post-apocalyptic world, there's no doubt about it, or perhaps rather a series of post-apocalyptic worlds. When we explore these liminal spaces, we're exploring what remains of the past. And to do what? We're not seeking closure, we're not trying to find something or someone important, we're not trying to survive here, to build a home here, we're not even just taking a trip down memory lane. We're just here for scrap, to sell for money. Disturbing these pristine places, these time capsules of a bygone world, and stripping them bare of anything that isn't nailed down, all these things that, might have historical importance or cultural importance, are all just fed to this beast of decay, and these places try to defend themselves in the form of the various monsters that dwell here and defend these places from us. Time and time again, they'll wipe out a squad, but the company always has more disposable workers to send. Thus, the monster hiding in the building represents entropy, the decay of memory. Perhaps it is the one who destroyed this civilization in the first place, perhaps it is just a vulture picking at the bones. Either way, we're just its worker bees, collecting food for it. Because all we can do is feed it and hope it stays appeased. So that's what Lethal Company is about. It's about returning to the past, collecting memories to feed a great monster, write something here about the monster also being a metaphor for capitalism. That ties into this theory, because capitalism is often blamed for the destruction of third spaces and childhood innocence, and also is directly responsible for the destruction of our real world and real time, the real apocalypse, yada yada yada. Many liminal spaces are also places like abandoned malls and abandoned bowling alleys and such, buildings that have been made endangered species by the progression of capitalism and technology. So that's perhaps why it's so special to me. Why there's a strange comfort and horror beyond the liminal space aesthetics. Visiting these places feels nice, but it also feels strange. We don't belong here. We perhaps once did, but we don't anymore. And we've only come here to pillage it of what does belong here. This all ties into the liminal space I was talking about earlier, that feeling that we're disturbing a memory, and not even our memory. This sci-fi world, the aspects that make Lethal Company's worlds, while familiar, still very distinct from our worlds, just remind us that this isn't even our memory to pillage. It's someone else's memory. And if you've watched my previous video about Hollow Knight, you might expect there to be a last-minute turnaround where the analysis becomes more hopeful, and I lead us all to a satisfying, heartwarming conclusion. Nope, not this time. Lethal Company is a bleak game. The devs are talking about making an ending, likely something to do with the drill aimed towards the company building, but I doubt that ending will be happy. We'll be lucky if it's bittersweet. This world, despite its biologically impractical monsters, cartoonish physics, and countless bugs and glitches, has always felt very real and immersive to me and many other people. Partially because of how diegetic the UIs are, but also because, well, in the real world, all kinds of worlds are ending around us, not world, but worlds, and not just physically, but psychologically. Anytime we forget something, as an individual or as a society, that is a piece of a world lost forever. And in the physical sense, we're all marching towards the end of both our individual and collective worlds, and thus Lethal Company hits home. When it's scary, when it's funny, when it's sad, it hits home. I started playing Lethal Company during a very bleak time of my life. I reached an all-time low with my gender dysphoria, while still desperately clinging on to my old identity. I was dreading the inevitable changes that would happen to my body, feeling helpless to stop it because of my refusal to accept my transgender identity to get the care that I needed. Additionally, it was also my last year in high school, and I was terrified of having to abandon my friends and everything I knew. I was terrified of going into the unknown and afraid I'd waste my time on this earth. I was mentally prepared for not just the death of who I was, as I was still trying to cling on to my femininity without physically or socially transitioning, but I was also preparing for the loss of my entire world, everything that I knew before. And yes, I was entering another world, one that I'm in now, one that I'm thriving in now, but back then it wasn't one that I understood, wasn't one that I'd mapped out. I didn't know if I could survive in it. And think about the point we're in now, in our world, the world we grew up in, the world we were promised. We're watching it die. Consumed by capitalism, consumed by pollution, consumed by entropy. It doesn't matter, because it's all going away. And often we're the ones making it go away. Whether it's selling our old toys in a garage sale, working for a company that demolishes a local mall, or even just buying gas to feed our car at the expense of this beautiful natural world we live in, we lose entire worlds every day. We destroy worlds every day. And we're responsible for it some of the time. Not all the time, to a certain degree. Everything dies eventually, but we're hastening it. We're getting our hands dirty. So with all of that in mind, I think I figured out why Lethal Company is so special to me. I used it as an escape, quite frankly, which might sound strange after all of that yapping trying to connect the game to the inevitable decay of everything, but there's one key aspect of Lethal Company I haven't mentioned yet. I don't think this kind of world would work in a single-player game. It's so overwhelmingly bleak, lonely, and helpless that it neither serves as an escape from the real world, nor a commentary on the real world, like, say, another bleak sci-fi game, Mouthwashing, does. The fact that we play Lethal Company with friends is very important. Lethal Company's world is a grim reflection of our world, this is true. But we love to engage with the real world through a fictional lens. It's something very human, in my opinion. It's something we've been doing since the dawn of time. And there's one thing that can make any situation more bearable, comical even. Other people. We might be coping with our problems by exploring a fictionalized sci-fi version of a real dying world. We might be lonely and apathetic and depressed and scared, but at least we're not alone. And now, I will read one specific lore text file, one which I believe to reflect the themes of this video's overall, and I guess partially inspired this whole video essay, because this final Sigurd log, not actually written by Sigurd, but by his friend Desmond, who never really did find out what happened to Sigurd. But Desmond, this is what he has to say, and I'll just say it. October 15th, 1962. I am encrypting these logs to keep them hidden, as I fear the system will be wiped if they are found. It's all a guise. We're supposed to think it's all just a transaction, but our real job is keeping an incredible terror fed. How long until its fullness ends and its hunger is insatiable? God knows, maybe it has to do with all these desolate moons. Whoever reads this, I am sorry to burden you with this. Please have a good day and night. As what else is there for us to do?
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again. Because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping. And the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone. Beneath the halo of a street lamp, I turned my collar to the cold and damp. When my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence. Naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking. People hearing without listening. People